Welcome to Esperanza's journey. Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to another narrative that will deeply touch your hearts. Today, I will tell you the extraordinary story of Esperanza dos Santos, a woman who faced prejudice, rejection, and all the adversities of an era marked by injustice, but who never lost her dignity and inner strength. A story that takes place in 1878, in the heart of Recôncavo Baiano, where the aroma of cacao mixed with the winds of change that preceded the abolition of slavery. It is a narrative of true love, overcoming, and hope that is born precisely where it is least expected. Before we begin this exciting journey, tell me in the comments, where are you watching us from? I want to know every corner of Brazil and the world that our story reaches. And don't forget to leave that loving like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our narratives that warm the soul. Your like and subscription means so much to us. Recôncavo Baiano, March 1878. The winds carried more than the perfume of cacao flowers that March morning. They whispered changes that would shake the foundations of a society built on prejudice and injustice. It was the time when the first railways tore through Bahian soil, promising progress, while echoes of abolitionist debates reached even the most distant plantations. Esperanza dos Santos woke before dawn, as she always did. Her 24 years seemed to carry the weight of many decades of disappointments. Her uncle's house in Santo Amaro was still sleeping, but she already knew the day would bring the same humiliations as always. Mixed race, daughter of a Portuguese merchant and a freed Brazilian woman, she had lost her father 2 years before. Since then, she lived as a dependent in the house of Aunt Clemencia and cousin Josefina, who treated her like a servant, constantly reminding her that her presence there was charity. Her long, delicate fingers caressed the books she had brought from her father's room, her only true inheritance. Knowing how to read and write was rare for women of her condition, but it was also her only source of comfort and dignity. Outside, the fine morning rain created a melancholic symphony on the mango leaves. Esperanza closed her eyes and allowed herself to dream for an instant of a place where she could truly belong. She couldn't imagine that many kilometers away, at Santa Catarina plantation, a desperate man was praying for his son's life, and that this desperation would forever change both their destinies. Joaquim Tavares de Almeida, Baron of Cacao, knelt beside the bed where his son Antonio coughed a dry cough that tore at his lungs. The 9-year-old boy was growing increasingly frail, and all the doctors from Salvador had failed to find a cure for his infantile pulmonary tuberculosis. Widowed for 4 years, since yellow fever took his beloved wife Catarina, Joaquim felt the weight of loneliness and responsibility. Santa Catarina plantation, once prosperous, faced financial difficulties. Debts were accumulating, and rumors of changes in slavery laws left plantation owners uneasy. Donna Francisca, his mother-in-law, entered the room with a cup of hot tea. Her 58 years had been marked by losses, but she maintained the dignified posture inherited from generations of Bahian matriarchs. "Father Sebastião wants to speak with you," she whispered, placing her hand on her son-in-law's shoulder. Joaquim looked out the window where morning was breaking golden over the cacao trees. He didn't know that this conversation with the parish priest would change not only his destiny, but also that of a young woman who, at that exact moment, was praying for an opportunity to start over. When the priest arrived with his unusual proposal, 2 desperate lives would be about to meet in a way that neither could imagine. Father Sebastião walked through the plantation's tree-lined paths with the measured step of one carrying a delicate mission. He had known Joaquim since he was a boy, and could see the suffering stamped in his tired eyes. "My son," began the priest, sitting on the veranda overlooking the cacao groves, "I know of a young woman who can help little Antonio." Joaquim raised his gaze, a spark of hope shining in his dark eyes. "Esperanza dos Santos," continued the parish priest, "mixed race, literate, knows the secrets of medicinal plants her mother taught her. She lives as a dependent in her uncle's house in Santo Amaro, but," he made a dramatic pause, "there is a condition." The afternoon breeze carried the perfume of orange blossoms while the priest explained his proposal: arranged marriage. With rumors of upcoming abolition, Esperanza's uncles saw an opportunity to elevate their social status, and Joaquim, desperate for his son's life and pressured by growing debts, felt he had no choice. "She is a woman of value," the priest assured him. "She knows how to read, write, care for children, and she knows remedies that city doctors don't know." That night, under the silvery moonlight bathing the plantation, Joaquim made a decision that would change two lives forever. He didn't yet know he was about to discover a love that would grow slowly, like cacao plants, but with roots so deep that not even the most violent storms could shake them. A week after the agreement, the chapel of Santa Catarina plantation was decorated with wildflowers picked by the workers themselves. It was a simple ceremony, almost austere, but there was touching solemnity in how the afternoon sun painted colored stained glass on the whitewashed walls. Esperanza walked to the altar, carrying only a small trunk, her only luggage, containing the books inherited from her father. Her simple raw cotton dress had been lent by cousin Josefina, who finally showed solicitude, now that she saw advantage in the union. Joaquim waited at the altar with Antonio beside him, the boy leaning on a small cane, his large, curious eyes observing this woman who would be his new mother. Donna Francisca remained rigid in the first pew, hostile but secretly curious about the new daughter-in-law's education. During the ceremony, Esperanza and Joaquim exchanged cautious glances. He saw in her a silent dignity that impressed him. She perceived in him a gentleness hidden under the weight of responsibilities. When their hands joined at the moment of vows, both felt a strange current of mutual understanding. It wasn't love yet, that would be too presumptuous, but it was the first thread of a web that time would weave with care and patience. At the end of the ceremony, when Antonio coughed violently, Esperanza knelt beside the boy and for the first time truly smiled. She finally had a purpose, a family, even if built on conveniences. But, as she would soon discover, the best loves sometimes spring from the most unlikely encounters. Esperanza identified the tuberculosis symptoms on the very first night. While Joaquim slept in the living room, they had agreed the marriage would be merely formal initially. She watched over Antonio's restless sleep, observing each cough, each labored breath. The next morning, she walked around the plantation grounds, searching for the plants she needed. Reconcavo Baiano was generous with medicinal herbs, and she knew the secrets her mother had taught her before dying. She found Mai Benedita, a former slave healer who lived in a small house at the back of the property. The woman with graying hair and wise eyes immediately recognized a kindred spirit in the young woman. "This girl has the gift," murmured Benedita, watching Esperanza gather chamba and purple ipe leaves with precise movements. The plants speak to her. Together they prepared syrups with propolis and native bee honey, anti-inflammatory teas, and nutritious poultices. The treatment was gentle but consistent, very different from the bloodletting and purges that Salvador's doctors had prescribed. In 2 weeks, Antonio's cough diminished. In a month, the boy could walk around the yard without getting tired. Joaquim watched, incredulous, as this simple woman achieved what trained doctors had not accomplished. When he saw Esperanza teaching Antonio to read using the books she had brought as inheritance, Joaquim felt something stir in his chest. It was gratitude, yes, but it was also the first sprout of a deeper feeling he didn't yet dare to name. Days passed with a gentle routine at Santa Catarina plantation. Esperanza woke early to prepare Antonio's medicines, then helped Donna Francisca with household chores, and in the afternoons taught the boy to read and write. Joaquim began to notice she understood numbers. When the plantation's accounting books spread across the table, Esperanza approached timidly. "May I help?" she asked in a soft voice. Her fingers glided through the columns of numbers with precision that surprised him. She identified errors that had gone unnoticed for months, suggested economies, reorganized accounts with clarity that had been missing for a long time. "Where did you learn this?" Joaquim wanted to know, genuinely impressed. "My father taught me when I was little," she replied, lowering her eyes. "He said a woman who could count would never go wanting." That night, for the first time since the marriage, they truly conversed. Joaquim told her about Catarina, about how difficult it was to be both father and mother, about the fears that haunted him in lonely dawns. Esperanza spoke about books, about the feeling of not belonging anywhere, about dreams she kept like secret treasures. When the conversation ended, it was past midnight. Both felt something had changed between them, a mutual respect slowly transforming into genuine affection. From the next room, Antonio slept peacefully for the first time in months, and Donna Francisca, who had overheard the conversation by chance, smiled in the dark, recognizing that perhaps this marriage of convenience could transform into something much more precious. Colonel Baltazar Silveira rode through his 3 plantations with the somber countenance of one who saw the world he knew crumbling. Owner of hundreds of slaves and fierce opponent of abolition, He observed with growing discomfort the changes that Joaquim's marriage represented. He had coveted Esperanza since first seeing her in Santo Amaro. A beautiful, literate, mixed-race woman would be an interesting trophy, but seeing her married to the Baron of Cacao boiled his blood with hatred and envy. More than that, Joaquim was beginning to represent a threat to the natural order that Silvera defended. Rumors circulated that the neighbor treated his new wife as an equal, allowed her to organize plantation business, even conversed with her about politics. Silvera knew the railway would soon arrive in Reconcavo, bringing new commercial opportunities. He wanted to monopolize cacao trade before that happened, and Santa Catarina plantation, strategically located, was a fundamental piece in his plans. That afternoon, he summoned regional plantation owners to a meeting at his big house. The official topic was defense of private property, but everyone knew it was a conspiracy against approaching social changes. "We need to take action," declared Silvera, walking among guests with a wineglass in hand. "There are dangerous elements among us, people who forget their social position and contaminate our traditions." Gazes naturally turned towards Santa Catarina plantation. Everyone knew whom he was talking about. Meanwhile, on her house's veranda, Esperanza rocked Antonio in her arms, humming a song her mother had taught her. She didn't yet know that powerful forces were organizing against the fragile happiness she was beginning to build. St. John's bonfires illuminated Santa Catarina plantation with joy that hadn't been seen on those lands for a long time. Esperanza had organized the festival, including both free workers and the few slaves still remaining on the property. The yard, decorated with colorful pennants, received the sound of drums, mixing with accordion and guitar. Esperanza wore a simple blue dress, but her eyes shone with genuine happiness, seeing Antonio playing with other children, finally strong and healthy. Joaquim approached her during the quadrille, extending his hand in silent invitation. When they danced together in the center of the yard under everyone's gaze, it was as if a declaration had been made without words. Their bodies moved to the music's rhythm, but there was something deeper in that moment. The looks they exchanged spoke of respect that had transformed into affection, and affection walking toward something deeper. Donna Francisca observed from the veranda, a discreet smile on her lips. She had resisted the idea of that marriage, but now recognized that Esperanza had brought new life to her family. The festival lasted until dawn. When the last guests departed, Esperanza and Joaquim walked together through plantation paths, night flowers' perfume enveloping them like a promise. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" she asked, genuinely curious. "For returning joy to this house." That night, for the first time, they slept in the same room, not as strangers united by convenience, but as companions beginning to discover each other. But on the horizon, envious eyes had observed the festival with growing rage. Colonel Silvera swore to himself that this happiness wouldn't last long. The weeks following St. John's festival brought growing intimacy between Esperanza and Joaquim. Nightly conversations prolonged, gazes lingered, gestures became more affectionate. When news of abolitionist debates in Rio de Janeiro reached Reconcavo, Joaquim made a decision that surprised everyone. He would free his few slaves, offering them paid work on the plantation. "It's the future," he explained to Donna Francisca, who listened with an expression between shock and admiration. "And it's what's right." Esperanza felt her heart accelerate hearing those words. She saw in her husband not just a good man, but someone with courage to face social conventions for what he believed in. That night, under soft candlelight illuminating the room, their union was truly consummated. There wasn't just desire, but total surrender of two souls who had found in each other what they sought without knowing. Following Sundays, Esperanza began teaching some workers to read and write. My Benedita joined the classes, and soon the back veranda transformed into a small improvised school. Antonio ran through the yard, completely cured, his crystalline laughter echoing among fruit trees. Donna Francisca embroidered on the veranda, occasionally raising her eyes to observe her daughter-in-law with growing pride. Santa Catarina plantation prospered not only in crops, but in hope and human dignity. It was as if Esperanza's presence had awakened the best in each person living there. But not everyone in the region viewed these changes favorably, and some storms, as Esperanza would soon discover, arrive when least expected. The plantation owners' meeting at Colonel Silvera's big house had the air of a tribunal. The region's most influential men gathered in a poorly disguised conspiracy against everything Santa Catarina plantation had come to represent. "Gentlemen," began Silvera, his voice echoing through the room decorated with hunting trophies, "we need to discuss issues affecting our community." Joachim had been invited but felt like a fish out of water in that environment, charged with hostility. When Silvera began speaking about dangerous influences and threats to social order, he knew exactly where the conversation was heading. "There's information everyone should know," continued Silvera, a cruel smile on his lips. "The mother of our esteemed Baron of Cacao's woman was a Quilombo slave, a fugitive, and now this person is teaching our workers to read." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Joachim felt all faces turn toward him, expecting a reaction, a defense, perhaps a retraction. Instead, he slowly rose from his chair. "So," he asked, his firm voice echoing through the room, "what difference does that make?" The shock on Silvera's face was evident. He expected humiliation, not defiance. "My wife," continued Joachim, "is a woman of value. She saved my son's life, brought prosperity to my plantation, dignity to my family. If anyone has a problem with that, let them come to me directly." He left the room under deadly silence, leaving behind a room full of men who didn't know how to react to what they had just witnessed. That night, telling Esperanza what had happened, he saw tears shine in her eyes. "You didn't need to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did," he replied, taking her in his arms. A family always defends itself, but both knew that public declaration of support would have consequences yet to come. A week after the confrontation at the plantation owners' meeting, Santa Catarina Plantation's water source dawned contaminated. At first, everyone thought it was an accident, but when Antonio had a tuberculosis relapse after drinking the water, Esperanza knew it was sabotage. Mine Benedita confirmed her suspicions, finding traces of ashes and animal waste deliberately mixed into the spring. It was a cowardly form of attack that put the entire property at risk. That same afternoon, a pregnant woman appeared at the plantation gate, staggering from exhaustion and fear. Benedita Liberta, formerly known only as Rosa, was Silvera's former slave who had fled upon discovering she was expecting his child. "He's coming after me," she whispered, clinging to Esperanza's hands. "And he'll do worse to you all. I heard his plans." Esperanza welcomed her without hesitation, preparing a room and medical care for the woman in delicate condition. But the information Benedita brought was even more alarming. Silvera planned to accuse Joachim of inciting slave revolts, of being a dangerous abolitionist who threatened regional security. He had enough political influence to transform those accusations into serious problems. "He has hidden documents," revealed Benedita, "papers showing how he continued bringing slaves after 1850, when it was prohibited. If someone discovers..." Esperanza understood immediately. Silvera had secrets he needed to protect, and attacking Joachim's family was a way to divert attention from his own illegalities. That night, she met with her husband and mother-in-law to plan defense. They faced not just personal attacks, but a silent war against everything they represented: change, progress, equality. But Esperanza had learned since childhood that sometimes one must seek allies in the most unexpected places, and she knew exactly where to find them. The Imbe Quilombo was hidden in dense forests surrounding the river of the same name. There Esperanza rode alone through narrow paths, guided only by directions Mine Benedita had given her, and intuition inherited from her mother. Zumba, the community leader, was a 40-year-old man who had escaped from various plantations until achieving freedom. A literate former slave, he had learned to read and write in secret, and now used this knowledge to protect his people. "We know who you are," he said, when Esperanza presented herself at the clearing where the Quilombo's entrance was located. "The woman who heals children and teaches people to read." The community received her with curiosity and respect. About 30 families lived there, all fugitives who had found a new way to live in freedom. They cultivated food, raised animals, maintained an informal school for children. Esperanza explained the situation they faced at the plantation. Zumba listened in silence, sometimes nodding, other times asking pointed questions about Silvera and his methods. "We know that man well," he finally said. "He's pursued our people for years, kills those who try to escape, keeps slaves in conditions worse than animals." A young Quilombola woman approached carrying a child. It was Maria, who had escaped from Silvera's plantation 6 months before. "He has a hideout," she told them. "An old house near the river where he keeps important papers. I saw it when I worked there. He himself said they were documents that could never be found." Zumba and Esperanza exchanged meaningful looks. There was the information they needed. "Let's form an alliance," proposed Zumba. "We protect each other, share knowledge. What do you think?" Esperanza smiled for the first time in days. She had found not only allies, but an extended family that understood her struggle. When she returned to the plantation at nightfall, she carried a plan that could change everyone's destiny. The attack came in the early hours of a rainy Thursday. Esperanza woke to the sound of horses and voices whispering in the yard. When she got up to check, she discovered Antonio wasn't in his room. A crude note had been left on the boy's bed. "If you want the boy back, the mulatto leaves the plantation, and you hand over the lands. You have until sunset." Joaquim went livid with rage. Donna Francisca cried silently, clutching her shawl like a shield. Esperanza remained strangely calm, her mind working quickly on plans she had made with Zumba. "He's in an old house near Imbe River," she said. "Maria told me about the place." "How can you be sure?" asked Joaquim, desperate. "Because I know Silvera," she replied, her voice firm as steel. "He's cowardly and predictable. He always uses the same methods." My Benedita entered the room running, carrying fresh information that Benedita Liberta had passed along. An imperial inspector was arriving in the region to investigate reports of illegal slave trafficking. Silvera was desperate. "He'll try to force a confrontation today," analyzed Esperanza. "He wants to resolve everything before the authorities arrive." It was time to put the plan into action. Esperanza sent messages to the Quilombo through signals they had arranged. Joaquim gathered the plantation's free workers, loyal men willing to fight for the family that respected them. As the sun rose, painting the sky red, two forces organized for a final confrontation. On one side, Silvera and his henchmen defending a world of oppression that was crumbling. On the other, an unlikely alliance of former slaves, free workers, and a family that had dared to dream of equality. At the center of it all, a 9-year-old boy waited to be rescued by those who truly loved him. The siege of the abandoned house began before noon. Zumba and his men positioned themselves in the rear guard, while Joaquim and plantation workers attacked from the front. Esperanza insisted on participating, knowing the region's paths better than anyone. Silvera had barricaded the old house with some henchmen, keeping Antonio as a human shield. But he didn't count on the determination of a mother fighting for her heart's son, nor the cunning of former slaves who had transformed survival into art. The first sign the plan would work came when Imperial Inspector João Batista arrived with soldiers, alerted by a letter Esperanza had sent through Zumba's contacts. The letter contained detailed information about Silvera's document hideout. When soldiers invaded the secret hideout and found unmistakable evidence of illegal slave trafficking post-1850, plus records of local authority corruption, Silvera's fate was sealed. Surrounded and without options, he released Antonio in exchange for a promise of fair trial, a promise he knew wouldn't be kept considering his crime's gravity. Antonio's reunion with his family was emotional. The boy ran into Esperanza's arms, calling her mother for the first time. Joaquim embraced them both, feeling his family was finally complete and safe. 6 months later, in a second ceremony including Catholic and Afro-Brazilian rituals, they renewed their matrimonial vows. Esperanza was pregnant with Catarina, a name chosen to honor Joaquim's first wife. When the Golden Law was signed 2 months later, Santa Catarina Plantation was already a model of modern agriculture and dignified human relations. Benedita Liberta had become the plantation school's director. Zumba worked as foreman and advisor, and Donna Francisca publicly took pride in her daughter-in-law. 15 years later, in 1893, the plantation prospered with the couple's children. Catarina studied medicine in Salvador. Twins Francisco and Sebastião grew strong and healthy, and Benedita, Silvera's daughter they had officially adopted, broke the rejection cycle with unconditional love. Esperanza, now a respected matriarch throughout the region, remained on the veranda every afternoon, watching children play in the yard. She had found her place in the world, not by birth or imposition, but by merit, love, and courage. When Joaquim joined her in these moments, taking her hand with the tenderness of one who knows the value of what he possesses, she smiled, knowing that sometimes the best destinies spring from the most unlikely encounters. The daughter nobody wanted had become the mother everyone needed, the wife a good man deserved, and the woman an era of change demanded. Her story had become legend in the region, living proof that true love can overcome any prejudice, and that hope always finds a way to flourish even in the most barren soil.